A spontaneous midnight motorcycle ride turns electric as Jungkook and Jimin confront buried feelings, secrets, and a confession that changes everything. The engine roared awake beneath Jungkook's hands just as Jimin shouted, "Are you insane? It's 2 in the morning." The motorcycle shot forward anyway. Cold wind slashed across Jimin's face as the city blurred into streaks of amber and shadow. Neon signs trembled in the distance, traffic lights blinking uselessly over empty intersections. Jimin tightened his grip around Jungkook's waist, fingers clutching the leather of his jacket as the bike leaned sharply around a corner. "What are you doing?" Jimin yelled over the engine. Jungkook didn't answer. That silence was more terrifying than the speed. The city at night had always felt different, quieter, lonelier, like the streets were holding their breath. Tonight it felt electric, alive, dangerous. Jimin buried his face against Jungkook's shoulder for a moment, the scent of gasoline and faint cologne filling his lungs. Jungkook always smelled like rain on asphalt. It was oddly comforting. They tore down another empty avenue, skyscrapers rising like dark sentinels around them. Jimin's heart wasn't racing because of the motorcycle. It was racing because Jungkook had texted him 30 minutes earlier. "Come outside now." No explanation, no emojis, no casual joking the way Jungkook usually did. Just those 3 words. And when Jimin stepped outside his apartment building, Jungkook had been there already, helmet in hand, eyes darker than usual. "Get on," he said. Jimin had done it without asking questions. Now he was beginning to regret that decision. The motorcycle slowed suddenly as they reached the river bridge. Jungkook downshifted, letting the engine rumble low as they coasted across the empty span. Water below reflected the city lights like shattered stars. Jimin's arms were still wrapped around Jungkook, and he realized something unsettling. Jungkook wasn't shaking from the cold. He was shaking from nerves. That was new. Jungkook never got nervous. Not during exams, not during competitions, not even when he nearly got into a fight outside a bar last year. He always carried a reckless confidence that made everything seem like a game. But tonight, his shoulders were tight. His breathing uneven. The bike rolled to a stop near an overlook at the end of the bridge. The city skyline stretched before them, glittering windows, distant sirens, the quiet pulse of nightlife. Jungkook turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jimin removed his helmet and slid off the motorcycle, his shoes crunching against gravel. The cold air wrapped around him instantly. Jungkook stayed seated, head lowered, hands gripping the handlebars like he needed them to stay upright. "Okay," Jimin said slowly. "You dragged me out in the middle of the night, almost killed us with your driving, and now you're being mysterious, so I'm asking again." He stepped closer. "What's going on?" Jungkook exhaled deeply. His breath fogged in the cold air. For a few seconds, it seemed like he wouldn't speak. Jimin studied him carefully. Jungkook's dark hair was messy from the helmet. A faint bruise colored his knuckles, probably from the gym again. His eyes, usually bright with mischief, looked restless. Like something inside him had been packing for days. "I couldn't sleep," Jungkook finally said. "That's not exactly a crime." "It felt like one." Jimin raised an eyebrow. "You dragged me across the city because of insomnia." Jungkook shook his head. "No." The word came out quieter than expected. He swung his leg off the motorcycle and stood, running a hand through his hair. His jacket rustled softly as he turned toward the river. "I kept thinking," he said. "That's also not a crime." Jungkook laughed under his breath, but it wasn't his usual carefree laugh. It sounded nervous. Jimin's chest tightened. Something was wrong. "About what?" Jimin asked. Jungkook looked at him then. Really looked. His gaze felt heavier than the night air. About you. The words hit Jimin harder than he expected. He blinked. Me. Jungkook nodded once. Jimin tried to joke to diffuse the sudden tension. Wow, I must be very interesting if I'm keeping you awake at night. But Jungkook didn't smile. Instead, he stepped closer. Close enough that Jimin could see the tiny scar above his eyebrow, the one he got when they crashed their bikes as kids. They had known each other for years. Too many memories. Too many shared moments, which made this sudden intensity feel unfamiliar. Do you remember the first time we came here? Jungkook asked. Jimin glanced at the river. Yeah. They had been 17. Too young to ride legally, too reckless to care. They had snuck out on Jungkook's father's old motorcycle and driven to this exact spot. Back then, the city lights looked like freedom. Why? Jimin asked. Jungkook hesitated. Because I almost told you something that night. Jimin frowned. What kind of something? Jungkook inhaled slowly. The wind stirred around them, carrying distant sounds of traffic and music from somewhere far below. I was scared, Jungkook said. Of what? Jungkook's eyes flickered with something raw. Of ruining everything. Jimin's stomach twisted. The words carried a weight he didn't understand yet, but could feel approaching like a storm. You're being dramatic, Jimin said softly. Am I? Yes. Jungkook stepped even closer. Now they were standing only a few inches apart. Jimin could hear his breathing, feel the heat of his body despite the cold air. And suddenly, Jimin realized something unsettling. Jungkook wasn't looking at him the way a friend looks at another friend. His gaze lingered too long, too intensely. Jimin's heart began to pound. Jungkook, he said quietly, what are you trying to say? Jungkook opened his mouth, closed it again. His jaw tightened as if fighting a battle with himself. Then he laughed once, sharp and nervous. This is stupid, he muttered. What is? Everything. Jimin crossed his arms. You're the one who kidnapped me for a midnight motorcycle ride. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. I know. So talk. Jungkook looked up at the skyline again. The wind pushed strands of hair across his forehead. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. I think I've been lying to myself for years. Jimin waited. Seconds stretched. What about? Jimin asked. Jungkook swallowed. Then he turned back. His eyes were steady now. Determined. About how I feel when you're around. Jimin's breath caught. The words hung between them like electricity. For a moment, neither of them moved. The river flowed quietly below the bridge. Cars passed in the far distance. The entire city seemed unaware of the moment unfolding here. Jimin forced a small laugh, though his chest felt tight. You're acting like you're about to confess a crime. In a way, Jungkook said. Should I call a lawyer? Jungkook shook his head. No. He stepped forward again, close enough that Jimin instinctively leaned back against the railing behind him. The metal was cold through his jacket. Jungkook's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I think I've been in love with you for a long time. The world went silent. Jimin stared at him. His mind refused to process the sentence. You're joking, Jimin said automatically. Jungkook didn't laugh, didn't look away, didn't retreat. Instead, he held Jimin's gaze with terrifying sincerity. I wish I was. The confession echoed in the empty night. Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. Years of memories flooded his mind, shared laughter, late-night conversations, the way Jungkook always sat too close during movies, the quiet way he watched Jimin when he thought no one noticed. Suddenly, those moments looked different, sharpened by a new meaning. Jimin felt dizzy. "You're serious?" he whispered. "Yes." "Since when?" Jungkook hesitated. Before I even understood what the feeling was. The wind swept across the bridge again. Jimin looked away, trying to breathe. His pulse thundered in his ears. "You should have told me," he murmured. "I almost did." "When?" "Many times." Jimin looked back at him. "Why didn't you?" Jungkook's expression softened with a mixture of fear and relief. "Because I didn't want to lose you." The honesty in his voice struck something deep inside Jimin's chest. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't think. All he could see was Jungkook standing in front of him, vulnerable in a way Jimin had never witnessed before. The reckless, fearless Jungkook. Afraid. Afraid of losing him. And suddenly, Jimin realized something equally terrifying. His heart wasn't racing from shock alone. It was racing because part of him had always wondered about this possibility. He just never allowed himself to say it out loud. Jimin exhaled slowly. "You dragged me across the city just to tell me that." Jungkook nodded. "Yeah." A faint smile tugged at the corner of Jimin's mouth despite the chaos in his chest. "You could have sent a text." Jungkook scoffed. "Some things shouldn't be text messages." Jimin looked at the skyline again, then back at Jungkook. The night suddenly felt warmer, quieter, full of possibilities neither of them had dared to acknowledge before. And standing there on that empty bridge, with the city lights reflecting in the river below, Jimin realized that the midnight motorcycle ride had changed something fundamental between them. Something neither of them could pretend not to see anymore. Something that had been waiting, silent and patient, for years. Now finally spoken aloud. The wind across the bridge felt colder after the confession. Jimin didn't move for several seconds. His fingers tightened around the metal railing behind him while Jungkook stood only a step away, breathing unevenly like someone who had just run a marathon. Neither of them spoke. The city below kept living its distant life. Sirens, laughter somewhere far away, a train rattling across tracks, but on the bridge everything felt suspended in a fragile bubble. Finally Jimin exhaled slowly. "You've completely lost your mind," he murmured. Jungkook blinked. "That's your response?" "It's the only response that makes sense." Jimin rubbed his face with both hands. "You can't just drop something like that at 2 in the morning and expect me to respond like we're discussing the weather." "I didn't expect anything," Jungkook said quietly. "That's not true." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "Fine, maybe I expected you to punch me." Jimin gave a dry laugh. "That can still be arranged." For the first time since the confession, Jungkook smiled faintly. It disappeared quickly. The tension between them still vibrated like a live wire. Jimin pushed himself off the railing and started packing across the gravel, running a hand through his hair. His mind felt like a room full of alarms. "You're serious," he muttered again, more to himself than Jungkook. "Yes." "You're not drunk." "No." "Not joking." "No." Jimin stopped packing and stared at him. "How long?" Jungkook hesitated. "Years." Jimin let out a short, disbelieving breath. "Years." "Yeah." "And you thought this was the perfect night to suddenly tell me?" "I didn't plan it." "Then why tonight?" Jungkook looked at the dark river. His voice lowered. "Because tonight I almost lost you." The words cut through the air sharply. Jimin frowned. What are you talking about? You don't remember? Jungkook asked. I remember working all day, eating terrible ramen, and trying to sleep before you kidnapped me. Jungkook turned toward him, eyes intense again. You crossed the street without looking earlier. Jimin blinked. That's what this is about. A car almost hit you. It was going slow. That's not the point. Jimin stared at him, realization slowly dawning. You've been thinking about that all night. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His fingers flexed like he was still gripping motorcycle handlebars. I saw the headlights, he said quietly. For a second I thought. He stopped. Jimin's chest tightened unexpectedly. Thought what? Jungkook shook his head. Never mind. No, say it. Jungkook looked up again, eyes darker now. For a second, I thought you were going to disappear before I ever told you. Silence fell again. The wind lifted Jimin's hair as he processed the weight of those words. You're being dramatic, Jimin said softly, though his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Jungkook replied. But it scared you. Yes. Jimin studied him carefully. There was something raw in Jungkook's expression, an honesty that felt almost uncomfortable to witness. You've never been this serious before, Jimin said. I've never been this honest before. That's terrifying. Jungkook laughed quietly. Tell me about it. Jimin crossed his arms, trying to regain control of the situation. So what exactly were you expecting me to say? I wasn't expecting anything. That's a lie. Jungkook shrugged. Okay, maybe I hoped you wouldn't run away. Jimin smirked. I'm considering it. You're still here. Barely. They stared at each other again. The air between them felt charged. Jungkook stepped closer, unconsciously. Jimin noticed. So what now? Jimin asked. Jungkook tilted his head. What do you mean? You've confessed, Jimin said. Great, congratulations. What's the next step in your brilliant midnight plan? There wasn't a plan. You drove me across the entire city. I needed to say it somewhere that mattered. Jimin glanced around the bridge. And this place matters. Yes. Why? Jungkook looked at the skyline again. Because this is where everything started. Jimin frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jungkook leaned against the motorcycle, crossing his arms. Do you remember the fight we had here? Jimin thought for a moment. Then his eyes widened. You mean the night you punched Taehyung? Jungkook groaned. He deserved it. He called my haircut stupid. He called you stupid. Well, my haircut was stupid. That's not the point. Jimin chuckled softly. You got suspended from school for that. Worth it. Jimin shook his head. You were insane back then. I still am. Jimin's smile faded slowly. Is that when it started? Jungkook hesitated. Partly. Jimin raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck again. I think I started noticing things about you before that. Like what? Like how you laugh when you're nervous. I do not. You absolutely do. Jimin opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Jungkook smirked. See, you just did it. Jimin rolled his eyes. You dragged me out here to analyze my laugh. No, Jungkook said. His expression softened again. I dragged you out here because pretending stopped working. Jimin looked down at the gravel. What if I don't feel the same way? Jungkook's shoulders stiffened slightly. Then nothing changes, he said after a moment. That's impossible. Why? Because you just rewrote 10 years of friendship. Jungkook's gaze dropped. Yeah, I know. The vulnerability in his voice made Jimin's chest ache. You should have told me earlier, Jimin said. I tried. When? Every time we sat this close and I almost said something. Jimin's heart skipped. They were standing close again without realizing it. Close enough to hear each other's breathing. You're serious about this, Jimin murmured. Jungkook nodded. Completely. Jimin searched his face. You're risking everything. I already did. The quiet confidence in Jungkook's voice made something shift inside Jimin. He suddenly remembered dozens of small moments. Late-night calls. Jungkook waiting outside his building for no reason. The way he always noticed when Jimin was upset before anyone else. Jimin swallowed. You're an idiot, he said softly. Jungkook chuckled. I've been called worse. You realize this could destroy our friendship. I know. And you still said it. Yes. Why? Jungkook looked directly into his eyes. Because not saying it was worse. The answer hit harder than Jimin expected. For a moment, neither of them moved again. Then Jimin sighed heavily and turned away, walking toward the railing again. Jungkook watched him carefully. Say something, Jungkook said. I'm thinking. That's dangerous. Shut up. Jungkook obeyed. Jimin leaned over the railing, staring at the dark water below. His thoughts spiraled in every direction. Confusion. Shock. And something else he didn't want to name yet. After a long silence, he spoke again. You're really good at ruining peaceful nights. I try. Jimin looked over his shoulder. And you're incredibly stubborn. Also true. Jimin hesitated. Then he asked quietly, did you ever think I might notice? Jungkook blinked. I hoped you wouldn't. Why? Because if you noticed and didn't say anything, it would mean you didn't feel the same. Jimin turned back toward him slowly. And if I did? Jungkook froze. The air seemed to stop moving. What? He asked. Jimin studied him carefully. I said asterisk if asterisk. Jungkook stepped forward again. His voice dropped to a whisper. Jimin. Jimin held his gaze. You never asked what I feel. Jungkook's heartbeat felt suddenly audible in the quiet night. What do you feel? He asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath, watching Jungkook's nervous anticipation. Then he smiled faintly. You're not the only one who couldn't sleep tonight. Jungkook stared at him, stunned. What does that mean? Jimin tilted his head slightly. It means, he said quietly, this conversation might be more complicated than you expected. Jungkook's pulse jumped. For the first time since the confession, hope flickered across his face. And the quiet bridge, the glowing skyline, and the silent river suddenly felt like the beginning of something neither of them had been brave enough to confront until now. Jungkook stared at Jimin like the ground had shifted under his feet. The faint smile on Jimin's lips was small, almost teasing, but his eyes held something much deeper, something uncertain, guarded, and frighteningly honest. You're not the only one who couldn't sleep tonight. The words echoed in Jungkook's head. What does that mean? Jungkook asked again, his voice rougher this time. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back against the railing, folding his arms across his chest while studying Jungkook as if seeing him from a completely new angle. The wind brushed through the quiet bridge again. You look like someone just handed you a live grenade, Jimin said. I feel like someone did. Jimin chuckled softly, but the sound carried tension. You dropped a confession bomb on me first. Don't act like you're the victim. Jungkook rubbed his forehead. You're avoiding the question. I'm thinking. You've been thinking for 10 minutes. Big revelations require processing time. Jungkook stepped closer. Jimin. The way he said his name made Jimin glance up. There was something urgent in Jungkook's eyes now. Not reckless, not playful, just raw anticipation. Stop stalling, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin sighed. You've always been impatient. Only when my entire life might be about to implode. That's dramatic. Answer the question. Jimin looked down at the gravel, then back at him. You really want honesty? Yes. Even if you don't like the answer. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Yes. Jimin studied him for another long moment. Then he spoke slowly. I wasn't surprised when you said it. Jungkook blinked. What? Jimin shrugged slightly. I said I wasn't surprised. That's impossible. It's really not. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair in disbelief. You're telling me you knew. Not exactly knew, Jimin said, but I suspected. Jungkook stared at him. How? You're terrible at hiding things. I am not. You absolutely are. Jungkook crossed his arms defensively. I've been hiding this for years. Jimin tilted his head. You once stared at me for 5 minutes straight during a movie. That movie was boring. You didn't blink. Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jimin continued calmly. You also get weirdly protective whenever someone flirts with me. That's called friendship. You glared at that bartender last month like he committed a crime. He was annoying. He was complimenting my jacket. Jungkook looked away. That jacket was ugly. Jimin laughed under his breath. You're unbelievable. Jungkook's ears were turning red now. That still doesn't explain why you weren't surprised, he muttered. Jimin's smile faded a little. Because I've caught you looking at me before. The confession landed quietly between them. Jungkook's heartbeat stumbled. You noticed. More than once. Jungkook suddenly felt exposed in a way he never had before. Why didn't you say anything? Jimin shrugged again. I wasn't sure. About what? About whether I was imagining it. And about whether I wanted to know the truth. Jungkook frowned. Why wouldn't you? Jimin didn't answer right away. Instead, he pushed himself off the railing and walked slowly past Jungkook toward the motorcycle. His footsteps crunched softly on the gravel. Because the truth complicates things, he said. Jungkook turned to face him. You think this isn't complicated for me? Oh, it definitely is. Jungkook followed him a few steps. Then why are you so calm? Jimin stopped beside the motorcycle. I'm not calm. You look calm. That's because I'm good at pretending. Jungkook studied his face carefully. For the first time tonight, he noticed something else beneath Jimin's composure. Nervousness. The kind that hides behind controlled breathing and careful words. You're scared, Jungkook said softly. Jimin scoffed. Of course I'm scared. Of me. Of everything. The honesty in that answer made Jungkook pause. Jimin leaned against the motorcycle seat, staring at the city lights. You just changed something that's been stable for years, he said. I know. You're asking me to reconsider every memory we've had. I'm not asking you for anything. Yes, you are. Jungkook frowned. I literally said I wasn't expecting anything. Your face says otherwise. Jungkook opened his mouth to argue again, then stopped. Because Jimin was right. The hope in his chest was impossible to hide. Jimin watched that realization cross Jungkook's expression. Then he sighed. You're unbelievable, Jimin murmured again. What did I do now? You waited years to tell me. I told you why. And now you're standing there looking like a puppy waiting for approval. Jungkook groaned. Please don't compare my emotional breakdown to a puppy. It's accurate. Jungkook looked at him intensely. So what are you going to do? Jimin raised an eyebrow. Do about what? About this. Jimin gestured vaguely between them. You really want to rush this conversation? I've been waiting years. I think I'm allowed to rush a little. Jimin considered that. Fair point. The wind picked up again, rustling Jungkook's jacket. For a moment, Jimin just watched him. Really watched him. The messy hair. The anxious shifting of his weight. The rare vulnerability in his eyes. It was strange seeing Jungkook like this. Usually, he was fearless. Confident. The guy who jumped into situations without hesitation. But tonight, he looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Jimin inhaled slowly. There's something you should know, he said. Jungkook straightened immediately. What? Jimin hesitated. Then he said quietly, I didn't sleep tonight because I was thinking about you too. Jungkook froze. What? Jimin exhaled through his nose. This is ridiculous. Explain, Jungkook said quickly. Jimin rubbed the back of his neck. I had a weird feeling earlier. What kind of feeling? The kind where something in your life is about to change. Jungkook stared at him. And you thought that change involved me? Yes. How? Jimin shrugged helplessly. I don't know, instinct maybe. Jungkook shook his head slowly. You're messing with me. I'm not. Then why didn't you say something before tonight? Jimin laughed quietly. Because saying it would have been even crazier than your midnight confession. Jungkook stepped closer again. So you were thinking about me? Yes. Why? Jimin met his gaze. That's the part I'm still figuring out. Jungkook's heart pounded harder. Are you saying? I'm not saying anything yet. That's torture. You'll survive. Jungkook ran a frustrated hand through his hair. You're enjoying this way too much. Maybe a little. Jungkook stared at him, then suddenly laughed. A real laugh this time. You're unbelievable. So I've been told. But you didn't run away. Jimin tilted his head. No. And you're still here. Yes. Jungkook's voice dropped again. That has to mean something. Jimin's expression softened slightly. It does. What? Jimin looked at the skyline again before answering. It means I care about you enough to stay. Jungkook swallowed. That's not exactly a rejection. No. Is it a possibility? Jimin glanced back at him. For a moment, his usual teasing expression disappeared, replaced by something vulnerable. It might be, he admitted quietly. The words sent a shock through Jungkook's chest. Hope flared bright and sudden. Jimin noticed the reaction and shook his head with a small laugh. Don't get too excited yet. Too late. You're impossible. You just said it might be possible. I said asterisk might asterisk. That's more than I expected tonight. Jimin sighed. You really did plan this motorcycle ride, like a confession scene from a movie. I didn't plan anything. Sure you didn't. Jungkook leaned casually against the motorcycle beside him. So what happens next? Jimin considered the question. The quiet city stretched around them. The night air carried the distant hum of life, continuing somewhere beyond the river. Finally, Jimin spoke. Next, he said slowly, we figure out whether this crazy thing between us is a terrible idea or the best one we've never admitted. Jungkook looked at him, eyes bright despite the tension. Sounds dangerous. Jimin smirked faintly. Most interesting things are. The silence after Jimin's words stretched longer than either of them expected. Most interesting things are dangerous. Jungkook leaned against the motorcycle, arms crossed, staring at Jimin like he was trying to memorize every small expression on his face. The wind had calmed slightly, but the tension between them still felt electric. Jimin noticed the stare. You're doing that again. Doing what? Looking at me like you're analyzing a crime scene. Jungkook shrugged. I waited years to look at you like this. Jimin scoffed softly. That's not romantic, that's unsettling. Jungkook smirked faintly. You didn't complain before. I didn't know before. Well. Jimin exhaled slowly and rubbed his palms together for warmth. The cold air was starting to creep through his jacket, but he ignored it. The real chill was the strange new awareness of Jungkook standing just inches away. Everything felt different now. Too sharp, too real. You realize this could go horribly wrong, Jimin said after a moment. Jungkook tilted his head. Everything could go horribly wrong. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Jimin looked at him sideways. You're awfully calm for someone who just detonated our friendship. I'm not calm. You look calm. That's because panic doesn't help. Jimin studied him carefully again. Are you actually okay? Jungkook laughed under his breath. No. Good. You find comfort in my suffering. Absolutely. Jungkook shook his head with a faint smile. You're cruel. And you confessed at 2 in the morning. That felt less cruel. Jimin leaned back against the motorcycle seat again. Let's say for a moment that I'm not rejecting you, he said slowly. Jungkook's attention sharpened instantly. That's a very specific way to start a sentence. Let me finish. Okay. Jimin folded his arms. If we even consider this, whatever this is, everything changes. I know. You say that, but I don't think you fully understand. Try me. Jimin hesitated, searching for the right words. You're my best friend, he said finally. Jungkook nodded quietly. If we try something and it goes wrong, we lose that. Yes. And that scares me. It scares me too. Jimin frowned. But you still took the risk. Yes. Why? Jungkook looked at him for a long moment. Because pretending we are only friends started feeling like a lie. The answer hung heavy in the night air. Jimin swallowed. You really thought about this? Every day. Jimin gave a quiet whistle. That's intense. You asked for honesty. Jimin looked down at the gravel again. Then he muttered, You're making this really difficult. Jungkook stepped closer. How? Because part of me wants to be angry at you. And the other part? Jimin didn't answer immediately. The wind stirred again, carrying the distant sound of a passing car somewhere on the far side of the river. Finally, Jimin spoke. The other part wants to understand why I'm not as shocked as I should be. Jungkook's breath slowed. You said you suspected. Yeah. And and I think part of me ignored it on purpose. Why? Jimin laughed quietly. Because if I acknowledged it, I'd have to ask myself a question I wasn't ready for. What question? Jimin lifted his gaze slowly. Whether I ever felt something similar. Jungkook went completely still. For a second, it seemed like even the wind had stopped. You're joking, Jungkook whispered. Jimin shook his head slightly. I wish I was. Jungkook's voice came out softer now. Jimin, don't get excited yet. That's impossible. Jimin rubbed his temples. This is exactly why I didn't want to talk about it. You're telling me you might have feelings for me and expect me to stay calm. I said might asterisk. That's still huge. Jimin sighed. You're impossible. Jungkook stepped closer again, his voice lowering. When did you start wondering? Jimin hesitated. Last year. Jungkook's eyebrows shot up. Last year. Yeah. What happened last year? Jimin looked away toward the skyline. You remember that party at Taehyung's place? Jungkook nodded slowly. The one where you almost fought that guy. Exactly. Jungkook frowned slightly. What does that have to do with this? Jimin hesitated again. That guy was flirting with me. Jungkook's jaw tightened instantly. I know. And you looked like you were about to kill him. He was being disrespectful. No, he was flirting. He grabbed your arm. He touched my sleeve. Same difference. Jimin rolled his eyes. You nearly punched him. He deserved it. That's what you said tonight too. Jungkook crossed his arms defensively. Some people deserve it. Jimin watched him carefully. Do you remember what you said afterward? Jungkook frowned. No. You told me to stay away from him. Well, yeah. Then you said something weird. What? Jimin's expression turned slightly serious. You said you hated the way he looked at me. Jungkook froze. Oh. Yeah, Jimin said quietly. Oh. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. I might have been drunk. You were. Jungkook sighed. Okay. Jimin's voice softened. That was the first time I started wondering. Wondering what? Why it bothered you so much? Jungkook looked at the ground. That was probably obvious. It was. And you still didn't ask me. I didn't want the answer. Jungkook looked back up. Why? Jimin met his gaze. Because if you admitted you liked me, I'd have to decide what to do about it. And that scared you. Yes. Jungkook let out a slow breath. Wow. What? You've been avoiding this almost as long as I have. Jimin smirked faintly. Congratulations, we are both cowards. Jungkook chuckled. That actually makes me feel better. Why? Because it means I wasn't the only one losing sleep. Jimin shook his head. You're unbelievable. Jungkook leaned closer, lowering his voice. So what changed tonight? Jimin hesitated. You almost got hit by a car, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin blinked. You really think that's the reason? I think it reminded me life's unpredictable. Jimin stuttered him again. You're surprisingly philosophical tonight. Confessions do that. Jimin laughed softly. Then the laughter faded as the weight of everything settled again. You know this would be controversial, Jimin said. Jungkook frowned. Why? Because people expect things from us. Jungkook shrugged. I stopped caring about expectations a long time ago. You say that now. I mean it. Jimin looked at him carefully. You'd really risk everything for this. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Yes. The certainty in his voice made Jimin's chest tighten again. You're terrifying when you're this serious, Jimin murmured. Good. That wasn't a compliment. I'll take it anyway. They stood in silence again. Closer now. Close enough that Jimin could feel Jungkook's warmth through the cold night air. After a long moment, Jungkook spoke again. Can I ask you something? Jimin nodded cautiously. What? Jungkook's voice dropped. When you imagined the possibility, did you ever picture what it would actually be like? Jimin blinked. That's a dangerous question. Why? Because the answer might ruin your confidence. Jungkook smirked slightly. Try me. Jimin hesitated. Then he said quietly, I wondered what it would feel like if you ever kissed me. Jungkook's heart nearly stopped. The words landed like lightning in his chest. You wondered that? He asked hoarsely. Jimin looked suddenly embarrassed. It was just a thought. A very specific thought. People have thoughts. Jungkook took a small step closer. Now they were barely a foot apart. What conclusion did you reach? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin's pulse quickened. I didn't reach one. Why not? Because I never expected this conversation to actually happen. Jungkook's eyes held his. Well, he murmured, now it is happening. Jimin's breath caught slightly. Yes, he admitted quietly. Now it is. The air between them had changed again. Just minutes ago, the bridge had felt like a place for confessions. Now it felt like a place where something dangerous might actually happen. Jungkook could still hear Jimin's words echoing in his head. I wondered what it would feel like if you ever kissed me. Jimin stood in front of him with his arms folded again, but the confidence in his posture was slightly forced now. His fingers were gripping his sleeves tighter than before. Jungkook noticed everything. You can't say something like that and expect me to stay calm, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin looked at him sideways. You weren't calm before. This is worse. Why? Because now I know you've thought about it. Jimin exhaled slowly. People think about a lot of things. Jungkook stepped a little closer. Not that specifically. Jimin's eyes flickered with nervous amusement. You're analyzing it too much. You brought it up. I didn't expect you to stare at me like you're about to do it. Jungkook didn't respond. That silence was answer enough. Jimin raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously considering it. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. You wondered. That doesn't mean I gave permission. Did I ask for permission when I confessed? That's different. Is it? Jimin pushed himself off the motorcycle seat and took a step away, running a hand through his hair. You're dangerous tonight. I've always been dangerous. Not like this. Jungkook watched him carefully. You're nervous. Jimin scoffed. I'm not nervous. You're packing. I'm thinking. You only pace when you're nervous. Jimin stopped walking and glared at him. You're enjoying this way too much. Maybe. You're supposed to be the one panicking. I did that already. Jimin stared at him for a moment, then laughed quietly in disbelief. This is insane. Probably. You confessed. I admitted I've thought about you kissing me, and now we're standing on a bridge at 2 in the morning like characters in some dramatic movie. Jungkook shrugged. I like dramatic movies. Jimin pointed at him. Don't take another step. Jungkook paused. Why? Because I know that look. What look? The reckless one. Jungkook smiled faintly. You know me too well. That's exactly the problem. The wind pushed through the bridge again, colder now. Jimin shoved his hands into his pockets. You realize if anyone saw us right now, this conversation would cause chaos. Jungkook shrugged again. No one's here. That's not the point. Then what is? Jimin looked away toward the skyline. The point is this changes everything. Jungkook softened slightly. I know. You keep saying that, but I don't think you fully understand. Try me. Jimin hesitated. Then he said quietly, if we cross that line, we can't pretend it didn't happen. Jungkook's voice lowered. I wouldn't want to pretend. Jimin glanced back at him. You're not making this easier. I'm not trying to. Jimin laughed once, frustrated. You're unbelievable. And you're still here. Jimin's lips pressed together. That was true. He was still here. Still standing in front of Jungkook instead of walking away. Still listening. Still wondering. The realization made his heartbeat pick up again. You know what the worst part is, Jimin said. What? I'm not sure if I want to stop you. Jungkook froze. The sentence hit harder than anything else that night. What? He asked quietly. Jimin rubbed his face. I said I'm not sure. That's not exactly discouraging. It's not encouragement either. Jungkook took one careful step forward. Jimin didn't move. That's step number one, Jimin said slowly. You told me not to step closer earlier. That was before. Before what? Before I admitted things. Jungkook studied him carefully. You're conflicted. Very. Why? Because part of me wants to see if the thought I had last year was completely stupid. Jungkook's voice dropped. And the other part? The other part thinks we're about to ruin our lives. Jungkook chuckled softly. That's dramatic. You're the one who confessed love tonight. Well. They were standing closer again now. Too close to ignore the tension. Jimin could hear Jungkook's breathing clearly. Say something honest, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin frowned slightly. I've been honest all night. No, Jungkook replied, you've been careful. Jimin stared at him. What do you want me to say? The truth. Jimin hesitated. The bridge felt strangely quiet again, like the entire city was waiting for his answer. Finally, he spoke. The truth is I've been curious about you for longer than I admitted. Jungkook felt his pulse spike. How long? 2 years. Jungkook blinked. 2 years. Yes. Why didn't you say anything? Jimin laughed bitterly. Because it sounded ridiculous in my head. What sounded ridiculous? The idea that my best friend might look at me differently. Jungkook's expression softened. And now you've confirmed it. Jungkook stepped even closer. Now they were only inches apart. Jimin noticed. But he didn't step back. You said you wondered what it would feel like if I kissed you, Jungkook said softly. Jimin's throat tightened slightly. I remember. Do you still wonder? Jimin swallowed. That's a dangerous question. Answer it. Jimin hesitated. Then he admitted quietly. Yes. The honesty hung between them like electricity. Jungkook's voice became almost a whisper. So why are we still talking? Jimin's eyes widened slightly. Because thinking about something and actually doing it are very different. Are they? Yes. Jungkook leaned a little closer. Jimin could feel the warmth of his breath now. Jungkook, Jimin warned softly. You said you weren't sure if you wanted to stop me. I said I wasn't sure. That's enough. Jimin laughed nervously. You're insane. Probably. You're about to do something reckless. I've done reckless things before. This is different. Why? Jimin's voice dropped. Because this matters. Jungkook paused at that. The seriousness in Jimin's tone cut through the tension. You're right, Jungkook said quietly. It does matter. For a moment, neither of them moved. Their faces were close enough that even the smallest movement would close the distance completely. Jimin's heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. You're staring again, he whispered. I'm deciding something. That sounds dangerous. It is. Jimin exhaled slowly. Jungkook. Yes. If you do this, you better be very sure. Jungkook held his gaze. I've been sure for years. Jimin's breath caught slightly. The wind swept across the bridge again, colder than before, but neither of them moved. And for the first time that night, the tension between them wasn't just about confession anymore. It was about the moment right before something irreversible. The space between them had shrunk to almost nothing. Jimin could feel Jungkook's breath brushing faintly against his face, warm against the cold wind sweeping across the bridge. The city lights below flickered across the river like restless stars, but neither of them looked away from each other long enough to notice. For the first time that night, Jimin realized something terrifying. He wasn't stepping back. You're still not moving, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin's voice came out softer than he intended. Neither are you. That's because I'm waiting. For what? For you to tell me to stop. Jimin exhaled slowly. You're putting too much responsibility on me. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Am I? Yes. You said you weren't sure if you wanted to stop me. That was before you were standing this close. Jungkook's lips curved faintly. You noticed. Of course I noticed. Jungkook studied him carefully, searching his face for any sign of hesitation that meant he should walk away. But Jimin wasn't leaving. Instead, Jimin was watching him with a strange mix of nerves and curiosity. That look alone made Jungkook's heart pound harder. You're thinking too much again, Jungkook said. That's because you're making this extremely complicated. I thought we agreed life is complicated. Jimin shook his head slowly. You're unbelievable. And you're still here. Jimin sighed. You keep saying that like it proves something. Maybe it does. Jimin leaned back against the railing again, though Jungkook remained close enough that the distance barely changed. You're confident tonight, Jimin murmured. I waited years for this conversation. Confident people don't look like they're about to jump off a cliff. Jungkook laughed quietly. That's exactly what this feels like. Jimin glanced at him. So why jump? Jungkook's answer came without hesitation. Because I'd regret it more if I didn't. The simplicity of that response made Jimin look away toward the city again. The skyline stretched endlessly in front of them, glowing quietly in the early hours of morning. You know something, Jimin said after a moment. What? You're very bad for my peace of mind. Jungkook smirked. I've been told that before. Jimin turned his head again, studying him. You're serious about this? Yes. And if I told you tomorrow that this was a mistake? Jungkook paused. Then he said quietly, then at least I'd know we tried. Jimin frowned slightly. That's reckless. Maybe. Very reckless. Still worth it. Jimin stared at him like he was trying to figure out how someone could be both this stubborn and this sincere at the same time. "You're going to make me say something stupid," Jimin muttered. "Like what?" "Like admitting I'm curious." Jungkook's voice softened immediately. "You already admitted that. Don't remind me." Jungkook leaned slightly closer again. "You said you wondered what it would feel like." Jimin's pulse quickened. "You're obsessed with that sentence. Because it matters." Jimin raised an eyebrow. "Why does it matter so much?" "Because it means I wasn't imagining everything." Jimin looked down briefly. "You were." The quiet confirmation hung heavily between them. Jungkook felt his chest tighten. "So you really thought about it," he murmured. "Yes." "How many times?" Jimin immediately looked back up. "That's none of your business." Jungkook grinned. "That means more than once." Jimin shoved his shoulder lightly. "Stop analyzing everything." "I can't help it." "You absolutely can." Jungkook chuckled softly. "You're blushing." "I am not." "You definitely are." "That's because it's cold." "Your ears are red." Jimin groaned. "You're impossible tonight. And you're adorable when you're embarrassed." Jimin froze. "Did you just call me adorable?" Jungkook blinked. "Maybe." Jimin stared at him in disbelief. "Wow. What?" "You've gone from nervous confessions to flirting very quickly." Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm adjusting." Jimin shook his head with a small laugh. "This is unreal." "But you're smiling." "I'm smiling because this situation is ridiculous." "You're still smiling." Jimin tried to hide it but failed. For a brief moment, the tension softened. But it didn't disappear. If anything, the laughter only made the closeness between them feel more real. More dangerous. "You know what the weirdest part is?" Jimin said quietly. "What?" "I'm not as scared as I thought I'd be." Jungkook's expression softened. "That's good, right?" "I'm not sure." "Why not?" "Because that probably means I've been lying to myself longer than I realized." Jungkook stepped a little closer again. "So what does that mean now?" Jimin hesitated. Then he spoke honestly. "It means part of me wants to see what happens." Jungkook's breath caught slightly. "And the other part?" "The other part thinks we're about to create a disaster." Jungkook chuckled. "You really like dramatic words." "This situation deserves them." Jungkook's voice lowered. "Do you want me to stop?" Jimin looked at him carefully. "No." The answer came out almost automatically. Both of them noticed. Jimin blinked. "Well." Jungkook raised an eyebrow. "You said no." "I heard myself." Jungkook smiled faintly. "You're full of surprises tonight. Don't get used to it." The wind shifted again, brushing past them with the faint smell of the river below. Jungkook's voice became softer. "You're still curious." "Yes." "And you're not walking away." "No." Jungkook's eyes searched his face again. "So what are you waiting for?" Jimin inhaled slowly. "Maybe I'm waiting to see if you're brave enough." Jungkook tilted his head. "Brave?" "Yes." "You think I confessed love tonight without bravery?" "That's different." "How?" "That was words." Jungkook leaned slightly closer again. "And this?" Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. "This would be proof." Jungkook held his gaze for several seconds. Then he spoke quietly. "You really want proof?" Jimin's heart was racing again. I didn't say that. You implied it. You're interpreting things. You're encouraging me. Jimin smirked faintly. Maybe. Jungkook laughed softly under his breath. You're playing a dangerous game. Maybe I am. Their faces were only inches apart now. The city lights shimmered behind Jimin's shoulders, while Jungkook's shadow stretched across the pavement. Neither of them seemed willing to move away. You know what's funny? Jungkook murmured. What? If someone told me this morning that tonight would end like this, I wouldn't believe them. Jimin smiled slightly. Same. Jungkook's eyes softened. But I'm glad it did. Jimin held his gaze. And for the first time that night, the tension between them wasn't just nervous curiosity anymore. It was anticipation. Something quiet but powerful building in the space between them, like the moment right before a storm finally breaks. For a moment, the entire world seemed to narrow into the space between them. The bridge was still there. The river still moved slowly beneath the lights of the city. The wind still brushed past their jackets, but all of it felt distant, blurred at the edges, like background noise to something far more intense unfolding in front of them. Jimin realized he was holding his breath. Jungkook noticed. You stopped breathing, Jungkook murmured. That's because you're standing too close. You told me not to stop. That doesn't mean suffocate me. Jungkook's lips curved slightly. You're nervous. I'm aware. Should I step back? Jimin looked at him for a long second. No. Jungkook's heartbeat thudded harder in his chest. You're sending very confusing signals tonight. I warned you this would be complicated. Complicated doesn't usually involve this much eye contact. Jimin let out a quiet breath through his nose. That's because you keep staring at me like you're about to do something reckless. Jungkook tilted his head. Maybe I am. Jimin's pulse jumped again. You're unbelievable. You've said that 5 times tonight. Because you keep proving it. Jungkook laughed quietly. Then the laughter faded as the seriousness returned between them. You know what scares me the most? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin raised an eyebrow. That you might wake up tomorrow and pretend this never happened. Jimin's expression shifted slightly. I wouldn't do that. Why not? Because I'm not a coward. Jungkook studied his face carefully. You admitted earlier you've been avoiding this for years. That's different. How? Because now it's real. Jungkook nodded slowly. Yes, it is. The quiet weight of that truth settled between them. Jimin leaned back against the railing again, but Jungkook remained standing close enough that their shoes nearly touched. You know what's strange? Jimin said after a moment. What? I expected this conversation to be awkward. And it is. Oh, it definitely is, Jimin said dryly, but not in the way I imagined. Jungkook chuckled. How did you imagine it? I thought you'd panic. I did panic. You don't look like you're panicking now. That's because you didn't reject me. Jimin glanced away toward the skyline. That part surprised me too. Jungkook's voice softened again. Why didn't you? Jimin hesitated. Then he answered honestly. Because when you said it, it didn't feel wrong. Jungkook felt the words settle deep in his chest. What did it feel like? He asked quietly. Jimin thought about that question carefully. Like something I already suspected, he admitted. Jungkook let out a slow breath. So we've both been idiots for years. Pretty much. Jimin looked back at him again. You really hid this well. I tried. You failed sometimes. Jungkook smirked faintly. Apparently. Jimin studied him again, his eyes softer now. You know what the dangerous part is. What? I trust you. Jungkook blinked. That's dangerous. Yes. Why? Because if this goes wrong, it'll hurt more than anything else. Jungkook's expression turned serious. I wouldn't hurt you on purpose. I know. And I wouldn't treat this like a joke. I know that too. Jimin exhaled slowly. That's the problem. Jungkook frowned slightly. Why is that a problem? Because it means this actually matters. Jungkook stepped just a little closer again. I told you it does. Jimin looked up at him. Their faces were close enough now that Jimin could see the tiny scar above Jungkook's eyebrow clearly in the dim light. You've changed tonight, Jimin murmured. How? You're calmer than usual. That's because I already crossed the biggest line. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Confessing. Yes. And you think that was the biggest line? Jungkook shrugged slightly. Wasn't it? Jimin's lips curved faintly. Maybe not. Jungkook narrowed his eyes slightly. You're teasing me again. Maybe. You enjoy this. A little. Jungkook leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. You're not helping my self-control. Jimin smirked. I didn't promise to. Jungkook laughed softly under his breath. You're dangerous when you're curious. And you're dangerous when you're determined. Their eyes held each other again. The tension had shifted from nervous uncertainty to something warmer now. Something electric. Tell me something honestly, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin nodded slightly. What? If I hadn't said anything tonight, would you ever have brought it up? Jimin considered that question carefully. Then he shook his head. No. Jungkook frowned. Why? Because I wasn't brave enough. Jungkook studied him for a moment. That's hard to believe. Why? You're one of the most confident people I know. Jimin laughed quietly. That's because you only see the parts I show. Jungkook's expression softened. So tonight, we are both showing the hidden parts. Jimin nodded slightly. Looks like it. The wind picked up again, lifting strands of Jimin's hair across his forehead. Without thinking, Jungkook reached out. His fingers brushed gently against Jimin's hair as he moved it away from his eyes. The contact lasted barely a second, but it felt like electricity. Jimin froze. Jungkook froze too. Neither of them had expected that instinctive movement. For a moment, they just stared at each other again. You just touched my hair, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook blinked. Yeah. You've never done that before. I know. Jimin's heart was beating much faster now. That was new. Yes. The air between them felt heavier again. More intimate. More real. Jungkook slowly lowered his hand. I didn't think about it, he admitted. Jimin's voice was softer now. That's the problem. What is? When you don't think, you do things that change everything. Jungkook held his gaze. Do you want me to stop doing things like that? Jimin hesitated. Then he answered honestly. I don't know yet. Jungkook nodded slowly. That's fair. The city lights reflected in Jimin's eyes as he looked back at Jungkook again. You know something strange, Jimin said. What? I expected the idea of you liking me to feel weird. And it does. No. Jungkook's voice dropped again. How does it feel? Jimin hesitated. Then he admitted quietly. Familiar. Jungkook's breath caught slightly. Familiar. Yes. Jimin looked down briefly before continuing. Like maybe part of me already knew. Jungkook felt warmth spread through his chest. So we've both been pretending. Jimin nodded faintly. Seems like it. The quiet bridge held the moment between them. Then Jungkook spoke again. Can I ask one more honest question? Jimin raised an eyebrow. You've been asking honest questions all night. This one matters more. Jimin stuttered him. All right. Jungkook's voice softened to almost a whisper. When you imagined me kissing you, did you imagine stopping me? Jimin's breath hitched slightly. He looked straight into Jungkook's eyes. And for several seconds, he didn't answer. Then finally, he spoke. No. For several seconds after Jimin's answer, neither of them moved. The word asterisk, no asterisk, hung in the cold air like a spark, waiting for something to ignite it. Jungkook felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears so loudly he wondered if Jimin could hear it too. Jimin, meanwhile, had suddenly become very interested in the faint reflection of city lights dancing on the river below, though he was painfully aware of Jungkook's eyes still fixed on him. You're really not helping my self-control, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin exhaled slowly. That sounds like your problem. It became your problem the moment you answered that question. Jimin glanced sideways at him. You asked. I didn't expect you to say that. Jimin's lips twitched faintly. You wanted honesty. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit Jimin had seen 1,000 times before. The difference tonight was that the nervousness wasn't about exams, fights, or competitions. It was about him. You know what's funny, Jungkook said. What? I imagined this moment so many times over the years. Jimin's eyebrows lifted slightly. You imagined this exact conversation. Not the exact words, Jungkook admitted, but the tension, the confusion, you standing in front of me looking like you're deciding whether I'm insane. Jimin snorted softly. That part is accurate. Jungkook smiled faintly. But I never imagined you'd say you were curious. Jimin folded his arms again, though his posture wasn't defensive anymore. It was more like someone bracing themselves. Curiosity is dangerous, Jimin murmured. Jungkook leaned back against the railing beside him. So is hiding things. Jimin glanced at him. Are you trying to convince me of something? I'm trying to understand you. That's impossible. Not really. Jimin shook his head. You think you know me. I do know you. You know parts of me. I know the important parts. Jimin looked at him again, eyes narrowing slightly. You're very confident tonight. I've spent years observing you. That's not creepy at all. It's called paying attention. Jimin laughed quietly under his breath. You're unbelievable. And yet you're still standing here. Jimin rolled his eyes but didn't argue. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was charged, heavy with things neither of them had fully said yet. You know what else I imagined, Jungkook said after a moment. Jimin sighed dramatically. This sounds dangerous already. I imagined what you'd do after I told you. And Jungkook looked at him carefully. I thought you laugh. Jimin frowned slightly. That's rude. I thought you'd assume I was joking. That's also rude. And then I thought you'd get awkward and change the subject. Jimin hesitated. That part almost happened. Jungkook smiled faintly. But you didn't walk away. Jimin leaned his head back against the railing. That's because walking away would mean pretending none of this mattered. And it does matter. Yes. The word came out quietly, but it carried weight. Jungkook watched him closely. You're still scared. Of course I am. Why? Jimin turned his head slightly to look at him again. Because you're my best friend. Jungkook nodded slowly. And best friends aren't supposed to look at each other like this. Jungkook tilted his head. Maybe they are. Jimin scoffed softly. You're rewriting the rules. Maybe the rules were wrong. Jimin studied him carefully again. You're surprisingly stubborn tonight. I've always been stubborn. Yes, but tonight you're fearless. Jungkook thought about that. Then he shook his head. No. No. I'm terrified. Jimin blinked. You don't look terrified. That's because if I start thinking about everything that could go wrong, I'll freeze. Jimin's expression softened slightly. So you're ignoring the risks. I'm choosing you over them. The sincerity in Jungkook's voice made something shift inside Jimin's chest. He looked away again, staring at the river. You say things like that very casually, Jimin murmured. They're not casual. They sound casual. That's because I've thought about them for years. Jimin let out a slow breath. You're making this very difficult. I know. You don't even feel guilty about it. A little. A little. Okay, a lot. Jimin shook his head with a faint smile. You're terrible. And yet you haven't left. Jimin turned toward him again. You keep pointing that out. Because it matters. Jimin stared at him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, maybe I'm still here because part of me wants to see how far you'll go. Jungkook's eyes sharpened. That sounds like a challenge. It might be. You know I don't back down from challenges. I'm aware. Jungkook took a small step closer again. The movement was slow, careful, giving Jimin every opportunity to stop him. Jimin didn't move. You're really not going to stop me? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin's voice was calm, but his heartbeat was racing. I told you earlier I didn't imagine stopping you. That wasn't permission. It wasn't refusal either. Jungkook chuckled quietly. You're very good at this game. What game? The one where you pretend you're not encouraging me. Jimin raised an eyebrow. You think I'm encouraging you? Jungkook leaned slightly closer. I think you're curious enough to let me try. Jimin's breath caught faintly. You're dangerously confident. You're dangerously honest tonight. Jimin smirked slightly. That's your fault. Probably. The distance between them had disappeared again. Jimin could see the reflection of the city lights in Jungkook's dark eyes. You know what the craziest part of tonight is? Jimin said quietly. What? I don't regret this conversation. Jungkook smiled softly. That's a good sign. It's a terrifying sign. Same difference. Jimin laughed softly again. Then the laughter faded. The moment became serious again. You really would risk everything for this, Jimin said. Yes. No hesitation. None. Jimin studied him one more time, searching for doubt. He didn't find any. You're serious, Jimin whispered. I always was. The wind swept across the bridge again, colder now as the night slowly crept toward morning. Jimin inhaled slowly. Then he said something that made Jungkook's heart skip. You know what I realized tonight? What? Jimin held his gaze steadily. If I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I didn't. Jungkook didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because that sentence changed everything. Jimin looked at him with a mixture of nervousness and quiet determination. So if you're going to do something reckless, Jimin said softly, you'd better stop hesitating. The words not anymore lingered in the quiet air between them. For the first time that night, neither of them rushed to fill the silence. The city lights flickered across the river beneath the bridge, soft and distant, like the rest of the world had politely stepped back to give them space. The wind moved gently through the empty street behind them, carrying the faint sound of a passing car somewhere far away. Jimin looked at Jungkook for a long moment. Not the quick glances they had exchanged all night. This time he really looked. At the determination in Jungkook's eyes. At the nervous tension hiding behind his calm posture. At the boy he had known for years, who suddenly didn't feel like just a friend anymore. You're serious, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded. I always was. Jimin let out a small breath through his nose. You realize there's no rewind after this. I know. No pretending it didn't happen. I wouldn't want to. Jimin studied him carefully again, searching for doubt. He didn't find any. Instead, he saw something that made his chest tighten. Hope. Real, quiet hope. And that realization made Jimin understand something about himself too. He wasn't standing here because he was confused. He wasn't standing here because he felt pressured. He was standing here because walking away suddenly felt like the bigger mistake. You're terrible for my peace of mind, Jimin muttered. Jungkook smiled softly. You've mentioned that. And yet, Jimin continued, I'm still here. That's my favorite part of tonight. Jimin rolled his eyes, though the faint smile on his face betrayed him. You're insufferable. And you're still not stopping me. Jimin held his gaze. I told you already, I didn't imagine stopping you. Jungkook took a slow breath. The distance between them was barely there anymore. The tension that had been building all night finally settled into something quieter, something warmer. Something inevitable. Jimin, Jungkook said softly. Yes. If this makes everything complicated. Jimin interrupted him gently. It already is. Jungkook chuckled under his breath. Well. Jimin tilted his head slightly, watching him. You've spent years thinking about this moment, he said. Too many years. Then stop overthinking it now. Jungkook blinked. That sounds like permission. It sounds like I'm tired of talking. Jungkook laughed quietly. You're unbelievable. Jimin shrugged. You said that already. The moment stretched again. But this time, it wasn't full of hesitation. It was full of decision. Jungkook stepped closer the last inch that separated them. Jimin didn't move away. Instead, he watched Jungkook approach with a strange mixture of nerves and calm acceptance. You're really doing this, Jimin murmured. Yes. You waited years. Yes. And you picked the middle of the night on a bridge. Jungkook smiled faintly. Seemed memorable. Jimin shook his head with a quiet laugh. You're ridiculous. Maybe. Then Jungkook leaned in. The movement was slow enough for Jimin to stop him if he wanted to. But Jimin didn't. Instead, he closed the small distance between them the rest of the way. The kiss was softer than either of them expected. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just warm and real and long overdue. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear entirely. No city lights. No wind. No bridge. Just the quiet realization that something between them had shifted into a new shape. When they finally pulled back, neither of them spoke immediately. Jimin looked slightly stunned. Jungkook looked equally surprised. "Well," Jimin said after a moment, his voice quiet but amused. Jungkook blinked. "Well," Jimin's lips curved slowly. "I guess that answers the curiosity." Jungkook laughed softly, relief and disbelief mixing in his voice. "And?" Jimin looked at him thoughtfully. Then he stepped closer again, resting his shoulder lightly against Jungkook. "You're still terrible for my peace of mind," he said. Jungkook smiled. "But…" Jimin glanced at the glowing skyline across the river. Then back at him. "But I think I'm okay with that." The motorcycle waited silently beside them, the city stretching endlessly ahead, and for the first time that night, neither of them felt like they were standing at the edge of something uncertain. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a road they hadn't dared to take before. And as the quiet night slowly turned toward morning, Jungkook started the motorcycle again. This time, when Jimin climbed on behind him, his arms wrapped naturally around Jungkook's waist. Not because of the speed, but because some distances between them no longer existed anymore.